Hello, hello again. It's been a little while. Well, here we are in Lebanon, both figuratively and literally. And so let's just try to look at some wines from the region. And we have two wines here, Bargylus and Marsyas. The Bargylus is something that on this channel we like quite a bit, as you folks probably know already. The Marsyas is its relative. It's the same owners. It's the same philosophy, but it's made in Lebanon as opposed to Syria. Let's just kind of jump quickly into this. Bargylus, as we know, is a wine made in northern Syria near Antioch and the area where we had all these tragic earthquake not so long ago. And of course, there's the war in Syria and all the social upheaval that's going on. It's a pretty difficult time to be making wine there. It's on the Mediterranean, up in Mount Lebanon, basically in the chain of Mount Lebanon, at about 3,500 feet of elevation. So it's a high elevation wine. It's the logistics on the winemaking are pretty difficult. I hear that they have to send the grapes to Lebanon by taxi, the samples, so they can decide on the blend. And basically the winemaking is done via Zoom because the owners can't really easily go there. And so it's kind of adds to the story of what we're looking here in terms of, as we say, wine is a product of terroir, but it's also a product of geography and of history. So let's kind of put all that in the sort of the context of what we're dealing with here. Despite all that, these folks have been able to make really good wine year in, year out. And so we're going to look at this again here. Marsyas is owned by the Saadi family as well. The family is originally from Syria, a Christian family from the north of Syria, so from the area where Bargylus is from. They decided to have a wine property in Lebanon as well. After that, they started Bargylus. So, a little bit more recently, they acquired a property in the Bekaa Valley, also at a maybe 25 to 3,000 feet elevation. Totally different terroir because it's the alluvial sort of sediment in the Bekaa Valley that's sitting on a bed of rock, but quite maybe half a meter down. So, but still, that's is kind of sort of part of the history here of what we're dealing with. And they've started making a wine that's called Marsyas. It's a different blend, and we're going to talk about this in a second. So these both are 2016, which allows us to potentially compare. The vintage was very, very good across the region, so I think we're going to be happy with both of these guys. The Bargylus is primarily Syrah, so it's 60% Syrah, 20% Cabernet, and 20% Merlot. It's a very interesting blend from that point of view. So it's not really sort of, I wouldn't say it's a Bordeaux blend or a Rhone blend or whatever. It's maybe a French blend, let's say. And let's not forget that in the early days in Bordeaux, they used to put quite a bit of Syrah with the Cabernet, maybe up to 10%. So not sure that this is where this came from, but I mean, we'll talk about this also when it comes to the Marsyas. But anyway, mixing Syrah and Cabernet Sauvignon is not an entirely unheard of idea. Looking at the color, it's very deep, very rich. It's got a little bit of that sort of purple Syrah in it, and I can see it, and it's hard to convey that on the screen. On the nose, it's got a little bit of that floral, a bit of the tart, fruits, maybe raspberry that you can get with the Syrahs. It's sharp. It's really it smells light, but for whatever that's worth. A little bit of anise, licorice. On the palate, it's really very fine. It's well integrated. It is rich. It's got a little bit of that black olive flesh that I get in wines from the area. It's it's got the fruit, as we discussed, cherry, maybe raspberry, but it's also, it's got a little bit of acidity. It's well integrated. You don't really feel the tannins. It's just very elegant and very satisfying. For a wine that's pretty high in alcohol, I think we're talking 14.7% for both of them. You don't really feel that. It just carries it very, very well. If we look at the Marsyas, it's a different blend, very different, but it's the same grapes. Let's say it's 25%, 35% Cabernet Sauvignon, 20% Syrah, 20% Cabernet Franc, and then 10% and a little less of that, and that 10% Merlot and the rest Petit Verdot. So it's it's an interesting blend. It's got the Syrah as well. That's very present, not as much more Cabernet Sauvignon focused. Then we see whether we see that in the wine itself. And these varietals that are present in both. I mean, this is what here we really consider to be sort of Western, or Occidental sort of varietals, from France, from Europe, the Cabernet Sauvignon, the Syrah, the Cabernet Franc, the Merlot. They're not necessarily the most natural grapes in Lebanon, which is a southern, warmer climate, but there is sort of this, attraction to the prestige of these grapes and to the blends that are, of the Northern Rhone and the Bordeaux, which a lot of people have invested in, and then it makes some really good wines. But to a point where one of the most sort of knowledgeable wine critic in Lebanon, a fellow by the name of Michel Karam, has wanted to give them in their own sort of style, call them super Lebanese, like we have the super Tuscans. So basically a family of wines that are made with varietals that are not typically associated with the area. I think in Lebanon, they have more and more people now trying to, try something else and go back to things like Cinsault, Carignan, that kind of more comfortable in these climates. Abeille, Meroir for the white wines, and maybe this is one of the reasons why Musar is still so successful and so unique after all these years, because they early on latched on to these varietals as well as Cabernet Sauvignon, of course. Anyway, these wines are also very, very good, but it's sort of kind of a little bit of a different category, and we'll see how that evolves over time in what's going on in Lebanon. Anyway, just to go back to the wine itself, on the nose, to me, it does remind me more of a Bordeaux, and I say that because it's got a little bit more of that cassis, sort of richer, deeper red fruit, but also a little bit of bitterness, some like a dark chocolate type of note in it. Very rich. The red here is even redder, so to speak, than the Bargylus. It's sort of deeper, richer. On the palate, it's a little bit more tannic. It does have good acidity, so that's a wine that's really calls for food. It's fine now, but I'm sure it can evolve really nicely. It sort of seems like, to me, it feels like a bigger wine, maybe not as resolved yet, because there's a little bit, the alcohol is a little bit more felt, but again, it's a very good wine. It's just, if anything, I would think this one can age maybe a little bit longer to kind of have it settle down a little bit, even though it's very good, very powerful today. So we have two different wines, two very good wines, even though they're from the same property, although like hundreds of miles apart. But the Marsyas have really gone up in quality over the years. These fellows are really focused on quality, on organic farming, on diversity in their plantings. So I think that just the philosophy comes through in the wines. You're going to have two very good wines, depending on what you feel like. This is not like drinking a first wine and a second wine. Like in the beginning, that's how it was, because the Marsyas wasn't really as good. So I think it's encouraging to see that evolution. And if you can't find the Bargylus, which is hard to find in the US because of the trade embargoes and the sanctions on Syria, the Marsyas is very good too, even though it's a different wine. So both are recommended. Cheers. Thank you.